Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk. Got a great topic here that we're going to be discussing with you, and fortunate to have with me Dr. Jen Kermis and Brad Cook with the Illinois State Board of Education. Thanks to you both for being with me. Talk a little bit about an issue that is always on people's mind, but maybe even more so today than ever, as we deal with our educator supply and demand. And I know ISBE issued a report here a couple of months ago, so appreciate in advance for both of you to be here with me to talk a little bit about it, the ins and outs, and what people can learn from it and maybe utilize it in their own context. But before getting into that, Jen, wouldn't mind having you give a quick introduction to yourself. You're a return guest to IPA Talk, so grateful for that. But just let us know a little bit about you, and then we'll have Brad do the same.
Yes, thanks so much, Jason. I'm Jen Kermis. I am the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning at the State Board of Education. And in that role, I have the privilege of working on every project and initiative related to our ongoing strategy to strengthen and diversify the workforce, make sure that all students and schools have access to the teachers and the educators that they need.
Great. Appreciate that. And I know this, but others may not know, but they might hear a little bit in your voice there, Jen. You're a Boston person, right? Boston, yeah. Right?
Yeah. Yes, I'm a transplant. I'm originally from Boston, but I've been in Illinois for almost 15 years now.
Okay. So does that make you like a Red Sox and Patriots fan then, or any of that stuff?
Yeah, certainly originally here. I do live on the south side of Chicago. So here I now say I root for Sox of all colors.
Good for you. Good for you. That's great. All right. Hey, what about you, Brad?
Hey, Brad Cook. I am a senior data analyst in the Data Strategies and Analytics Department at ISBE. Wear many hats in the department, but one of those is as one of the two leads for the Educator Supply and Demand Report, and work mostly with data collections and the reports that come from EIS in particular.
Great, appreciate that. Well, so I've got a few questions, a few things that I've shared with you in advance, and just kind of want to walk through those. And I'll just pose them up there, and then I'll let you guys kind of duke it out to decide who wants to answer what, and you can pitch it back and forth to each other. But as we were talking, as we were getting ready to record here, so this supply and demand report isn't necessarily something that's produced, every year. It's something that comes now by mandate every few years. People in the field may have seen similar types of reports out there, but not maybe one in this format. So I'm just curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what this report is, what it entails, maybe what makes it different than other types of reports like this that ISBE produces typically.
Sure, I can start with that. It's a mandated report that comes out every 3 years, as you said, and the language of the bill intends for it to supply the legislature and others in the state, other stakeholders, with a tool to measure the supply and demand of educators broadly. So that's, I think, where it mainly is differentiated from those other types of more regular reports that we put out. The scope is certainly one of those defining features. This one is one this year where we added several new features, kind of adding on to what had been done in the past. We gathered early on much more stakeholder input, both internally and externally, meeting with different groups like Advance Illinois, Bellwether, the Data Transparency Policy Action Team, and the Latino Policy Forum. We began with a kind of wish list based on those meetings of a series of research questions that we had, the stakeholders had hoped to include in the report. Some of those had overlap with what had been done in previous reports. Many of them were new. We ended up with quite a laundry list, and we whittled it down to what was feasible, what data we had available. So even compared to previous reports, this round is even larger with 30 specific individual research questions that we tried to tackle. We report out mainly or exclusively descriptive analyses of the data to try and get at these. The trade-off was to make sure we're answering those larger questions that the mandate asks of us, the broad paint, the broad picture of the supply and demand of educators, but getting into the weeds to the benefit of what many of those stakeholder groups had requested from us.
So what would be the big rocks, Brad or Jen? Like what are the big things that we're looking at within the report, would you say?
Measures of retention, attrition. There is some overlap with our unfilled positions report. We're looking specifically as best we can from the data with those completers, the students who are finishing up school and entering into the workforce with a first-time endorsement and a first job. The weeds from there that get down closer, we try to disaggregate or break it down by different categories like region whenever we can, or subject areas. The administrators are a new key part of what we were doing this round that we hadn't done previously, a generally broader definition of what educators are.
Yeah. And I looked and saw some of the administrator data. I particularly was looking at some of the attrition information with regards to that. So let's just use that as a segue to talk a little bit about some of the specific results and the data that you found. And as I was emailing about some of the things I'd be interested in, the way I kind of pose this is the good, the bad, and the ugly with regards to the results. Not to be flippant about it, but also to just recognize that there are, I'm sure, some things that we were glad to see in the data, but maybe some things that we definitely need to be paying attention to as we deal with an educator workforce that, as we know, is a bit under pressure, as we have plenty of school districts out there still looking for teachers for certain positions, and some that probably surprise us of what positions need to be filled still. But just curious from your guys' perspective about the results and what you're seeing in the data, at least from this moment in time.
Yeah, I can give you some of the big takeaways that both the good and the bad. The first one, excuse me, is that certainly the COVID pandemic issued a lot of different challenges, and it was very disruptive. But the data that we have showed that the educator workforce has largely weathered the pandemic. It's certainly an area that we're going to continue to watch in the future. But so far, the data are positive. We also can say that retention is pretty strong in general in the state. The teachers are doing relatively well. The administrators have a little bit of a lower retention rate, and that's something that we would also want to monitor in the future. One thing that is new to the way that we gathered and analyzed the data shows that when educators aren't retained, our more nuanced look shows that even when people are changing jobs, those jobs generally keep them within their own district. So they're not leaving the workforce entirely. They're not jumping from district to district. That does happen, but much of that change is happening within that local area.
So would it be changes like maybe into leadership positions from being in a teaching position, something along those lines?
Yes, the report does show the movement of educators into administrative roles, and so we can account for some of that change. And we don't track it at a small granular level, but some of that is highlighted in the report, yes.
Well, what I thought was interesting in looking at the data with regards to numbers of, I guess it would be numbers of people entering into leadership positions, the last year of the report, so the report shows 4 or 5 years worth of data. The last year, the report showed quite a bit larger number of people moving into leadership positions than maybe the previous years.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers here open in front of me, but from memory, yes, we were able to show that change. And I'm forgetting if we showed that over time. I think it was over a 3-year period, if memory serves. So that's something that we were excited to include in the report that was requested by some of the stakeholder groups.
Yeah, well, and I think what that shows is between increases of responsibility of teacher evaluation, I'm sure some pandemic related issues and other things, there was some more help that was needed for that. What will be interesting for us, though, and this is more broadly just beyond leadership, is to see as we come out of the pandemic now, or have come out of the pandemic, and also see ESSER funding finishing up, what that's going to mean for the workforce and things overall. So I'm not asking for a comment, or I'll do the editorializing on that. That I won't put you guys on the spot for that right now, but that will be something that will be interesting for us to be paying attention to moving forward, and as a potential pressure point for us. Speaking of another pressure point, Jen, you mentioned this before we got started with recording, was just how the age of the workforce tends to be skewing over time, a little bit older, particularly in the administrative ranks. It appeared to be skewing a bit older there as well. So just curious about your thoughts as you were taking a look at that, and then even giving you an opportunity to speak into the state board has a lot of things happening right now trying to bolster the education profession by supporting people working on getting their education, their professional educator license, coming through prep programs, all of that. So I know I tossed a whole bunch at you there, but let's at least get started with the fact that we've got a workforce that, like other professions, is starting to skew a little bit older, and the ramifications of that.
That's right. That is one of, I think, the most sort of striking and unique findings that we have in this report. And I think that speaks a little bit too to how this report is a bit different than some others that we do. This is a report where we, step back and look at multiple years of data together and really try to think about how do we characterize the overall health of our teacher pipeline, or our educator pipeline, I should say, and our educator workforce. And how do we put that in sort of, traditional economic terms about supply and demand, but ultimately these are really important questions. Do we have enough educators? Are we, as a state, supporting the development and the preparation of enough educators to meet our needs now and to think about our needs in the future? And I think this pretty clear trend of our educator workforce skewing older over time, over the last several years, really suggests that we do need to make some critical investments and really look carefully at policy around attracting and preparing younger educators to the workforce. And ISBE currently has programs and initiatives to support that in a number of ways. One of the, I think, most important programs that we have for attempting to strengthen the pipeline and the production of teachers is our CTE Educator Pathway grants that allow schools to be able to start early career pathway programs that enable them to identify students who are currently in high school who have potentially an interest in becoming an educator, and allow them to design programming to hopefully put those students on an accelerated trajectory into and through preparation. I also think in the state of Illinois, the way that we've expanded access to Educators Rising is connected with and yet unique from those pathways. I think in addition to to coursework and dual credit opportunities and the like, I think that for many students, even if they don't have a full program or full coursework at their school, at least having an opportunity to have an Educators Rising club at their school, to have an adult advisor or mentor, and to at least engage in some type of activities and preparation that at least can sort of foster that continued interest in a career in in education, I think is really important. And our student body is much more diverse than our current educator workforce. And, our future educator workforce is our students. And if we want to have enough educators in the future, and if we want to have educators who represent and are ready to serve in our communities, then we need to look at our communities, and what better place, right, to get our future educators than from our current students.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just tack onto that with regards to school leadership. We've been fortunate to partner with the state board and some of the other providers for the pipeline program that we've got for educational leaders, where we're offering up tuition support to over 180 individuals throughout the state. IPA is working with 100 of those 180. And what's been terrific about that is we've over 50% of those individuals are in underrepresented groups. So that's to help diversify, obviously, the pipeline of school leaders that are going to be available to the field, and also supporting our rural school districts as well. I would say that that's something that is really important for us too, because it seems it's not uncommon for me within a week to get a call from a superintendent in a rural part of the state that is really struggling to get a diverse pool, or a pool at all for that matter. In some cases, they're not getting any candidates for those positions. And so that part is really critical. I'm curious, I want to talk about potential policy implications here just a little bit. But I'm curious about, with the data, just looking at it regionally here, did you see any, as you looked at attrition, retention? And by the way, with retention, I'd like to think the state's support of our mentoring programs for both teachers and leaders helped keep those numbers in check, right? I think those things are important at providing those supports to those early career teachers and school leaders, to help give them the support so that they don't move on, because we know after 3 years in each of those positions, we tend to lose a lot of folks. So hopefully this has helped stymie that a little bit. But I'm just curious about any potential regional variation that you might have seen in the data.
In general, overall, one surprising thing to me, at least, was the lack of a lot of variation geographically in the state. Things were relatively consistent, and they were consistent even over time between those areas. So that's one area where I think we're not seeing as much as we would have expected, and a lot of that is new to this report as well. So we were excited to be able to offer it this time around, to answer a lot of the questions we know people had previously about the potential differences, which are surprisingly small.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, Brad, I'm mindful of our time, and we're going to keep rolling here. So let's see how it goes. I know you've got little ones getting off the school bus, which I think is just awesome to highlight here during an IPA talk like this. Just trust me, I think it's great. So I'm going to ask this question and turn to Jen here just for her thoughts, knowing, especially Jen, because you deal with this stuff so much. And you've kind of alluded to this already as we've just talked about what we need to be thinking about from an age perspective here. But when you just look at this report broadly, and you think about policy conversations that we're having related to the pipeline and how we continue to support it, anything just broadly strike you as what we need to be considering here moving forward? And maybe related to that a bit is, what do school districts really need to be paying attention here when they're thinking about what they're doing locally in their school districts as well?
Sure. So I think, we all know at this point that preparation is a lengthy, challenging, and expensive process and experience. And I think we need to acknowledge that there is a need for differentiated levels of support for different candidates in different programs. We firmly believe that there are, that everybody who is interested in a career as an educator should be given all the supports necessary to make that dream a reality. And we need to acknowledge that a system that is sort of predicated on offering preparation and seeing who brings themselves into that process and succeeds kind of independently through that process in spite of the challenges is a system that is going to get us exactly the workforce that we have, which is a workforce that leaves countless schools without sufficient educators or without fully prepared and qualified educators, especially the most rural schools, the most urban schools, the schools that serve the highest percentage of low-income students. And I know I'm getting a little bit off base here, but I'll go back to that last comment for a second and just say, I want to maybe do a teaser here for the upcoming, soon to be released educator shortage survey, unfilled positions combined report that we'll be releasing in pretty short order here, which is just an annual snapshot, which does show, it's going to show more variation on geography, on school type, and I think we'll be able to have those conversations certainly then. But I say that to say, from a policy perspective, we've really got to think about what are the necessary supports for folks to successfully get through preparation, and then what are the supports to support people early career, like good mentoring and instructional coaching, like you were just describing. And then sort of thinking about continued support throughout careers. So what are those career ladders? What are those opportunities for career educators to stay in the profession and in their positions and continue serving kids? So I think there's lots to think about. There's lots that we can do, but I think the biggest thing is, just attracting more people to the profession is necessary, but insufficient. We've also really got to think about, are there additional supports we can provide that show real promise? And those could be financial, those could be mentoring, advising, coaching type experiences throughout preparation. In terms of what districts should be doing, I think district playing a more active role with their university partners and saying, here's what we need. We're your customer. We're hiring the candidates that you are turning into teachers. And here's what we need them to be able to do. And here's what we can do on our end to continue their development once they're with us. I think those conversations are critical for schools and districts and universities to have those conversations, to be thinking about a coherent career trajectory and preparation trajectory that is more seamless and is less segmented.
Yeah. Well, and I believe everything that you've outlined there makes a lot of sense. And I'll step back on my editorial box here real quick and make just kind of a blanket statement with regards to what motivates people in the various professions that they choose. And I've said this a lot to various people over the years, especially as we've talked about this current status of the educator pipeline. But if you go to Daniel Pink's book, Drive, he lays out the case that there are three primary things that motivate people to be in positions and to be satisfied in their work. One is that they want to make sure that they can take care of themselves. So it's ample compensation. We've definitely made some strides with that here over the last couple of years, as we've had, the minimum teacher salary come into effect. I saw, the mention of the average teacher salary put in the report, as well as how that had jumped up to around $51,000, I believe was the number that was there. So you have that. And, I think we're going to have conversations related to what's happening with pensions right now. When you've got the tier 2 folks having to work till they're 67. I know that's something I can say here. That's hard for the agency necessarily to take a position on that. I sure respect that, but we know we've had conversations with members about it. Beyond that, though, the second thing that Pink gets at is making sure that you're doing meaningful work, and it's work with purpose. Well, you can't get more meaningful, purposeful work than being an educator, right? And supporting our young people to think about what it is that they want to do for the rest of their lives. And then the third thing, and I do feel like this is a policy issue for us, and that third thing is autonomy. And I do feel like educators now are, I sense this kind of being in a tipping point. And maybe that's just because I've been around so long and I've endured so many policy related things. But, our educators are told what to do a lot with regards to, not just certain health, life, safety types of mandates, but also very specific curricular decisions that they have to make. And I do have concerns that the expectations of being told what to do in such a minutia sort of way is making people think long and hard about whether they want to stay in the profession, number one, or number two, even take an interest in it at all. So I believe as policymakers and members of the General Assembly I've talked to about this, we have to start paying attention to the legislation that we're passing, what's currently in statute, because that school code's doubled in size in the last 20 years, and it's not filled with empty pages. So I'll just leave my editorial comments at that, but I do believe that is another thing that we definitely have to take into account when we think about what we're doing here with the pipeline overall. But I will tell you, beyond all of that, I'm grateful for this report and adding some additional context to this, and it is a 3-year requirement. So, we won't see likely a report issued like this for a while. Jen, you brought up the you both talked about the vacancy report and some of that. So now that is something I think you mentioned to me before we started recording that's required annually. What if educators and school leaders are looking to stay on top of this and look at what the data is sharing, obviously that would be a good source of information for them. Is there anything else that they can be looking at just to make sure that they're staying on top of things with regards to what's happening with the pipeline in real time?
Sure, a couple of things. So yes, absolutely, the unfilled positions report, which this year is going to be done in conjunction with the IARSS and their shortage survey report. So in the past, there were 2 reports around the same time, and now it's going to be one single source of truth. So that will be one place to go.
That's a great report, by the way. The regional soups have done good work with that over the last few years. So it's nice to see those coming together. Appreciate that.
Yeah, we're excited about that. The report card in recent years has actually added new information and metrics related to teachers and administrators and members of the educator workforce. So that's another place to go. You can take a look at, at what the demographics of the workforce are, at what, retention rates look like, and at what out of field teacher rates look like. So looking at those numbers in terms of, where are the places where it's, just been totally impossible to find a teacher with the correct certification. And so we have somebody teaching a course that they're not yet qualified to actually teach. And those rates are actually very low across Illinois. School and district leaders have done a great job making sure that, to the greatest extent possible, that the right educators are in the right assignments. But there are places where that isn't currently able to happen. And so that is now public on the report card as well. So the report card is actually another place to look. We're really used to looking there for student data, but there's actually quite a lot more educator data there now as well.
Well, I know from looking at the state report card that the average number of administrators that school districts have over a 6-year period of time is 2. And that's straight off of the state report card. So if you're, in a school for 6 years, you can expect to have at least 2 building principals over that stretch of time, at least based on the way the averages read. So grateful for that. I think those things are definitely helpful.
Sorry, one more too.
Yeah,
quickly.
Please.
I know
Absolutely.
we're at time.
That's all right.
The what we call the IEPP, or the Illinois Educator Preparation Profile.
Yep.
This is the report cards like system for our educator preparation programs. So for the Illinois programs that prepare our future educators. Right now it shows teacher programs, but we're looking to expand that to include principal preparation programs and other educator programs. It's part of our strategic plan that the board just adopted. So, so that's a good resource too, and it will show you sort of where all the preparation programs are and what sort of supply is being produced or introduced into the workforce from each of those places and each of those programs. It will give, I think, schools a good sense of where they might go if they're looking for student teachers in a certain subject area, or just for relationships with really high quality preparation partners in higher education who might be able to create some kind of strategic pipeline program specifically focused on preparing future educators for that district.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying, because I thought from what I had talked with others about in the past with regards to that, I think it's called the IPEP now, right? Is that the acronym?
It used to be the PEP. Now
okay.
It's the IEPP.
IEP. Oh, so
Yes.
It's lost its PEP then, but that's all right.
Lost its PEP. I
okay.
don't remember why, but there was a good reason that we changed it. Someone else had that acronym or something, I think. But the Illinois Educator Preparation Profile.
Good. But the fact, though, that I think one of the most popular features of that is going to be as school districts are trying to determine what their needs are to fill vacancies to fill, that they would be able to go there and find out what students are currently tracking through programs. That will be significant for them and extremely helpful. So sure appreciate that. Well, Dr. Jen Kermis, Brad Cook, thanks so much for spending a little time here with me and talking about the educator's supply and demand reports. You would 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would have never thought to really maybe pay attention to something like this. But boy, today it is extremely critical for all school leaders to stay dialed in and tuned in to what's happening with our educator workforce out there and what the future might mean for us and how we need to attack that, because obviously the young people we serve, it's really important that we be on top of it for sure and do what we can to continue to bolster it up. So thank you both for your time. I'm grateful for it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You bet.
And Brad is a doctor too, and he's amazing.
Oh, my bad. My apologies, Brad. Thank you. No, that's important. No, I know. You can wave that off, but that's a big deal. Hey, anybody that endures a dissertation deserves to have that said. So thanks for sharing that, Jen. We'll be sure to get that out there as well. So grateful for that. Again, my name is Jason Leahy with Dr. Jen Kermis and Dr. Brad Cook. Appreciate you joining us for this IPA talk. As always, if there's anything IPA can do for you, don't hesitate to give us a call at 217-525-1383 or check us out on the web at www.ilprinciples.org. Take care.